Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming and watching this presentation or engaging in this presentation today. So I love the name of this track. Why are they soft skills if they're just so hard? Soft skills are often the things that we least intentionally design, that we least intentionally cultivate, and yet that are the most consequential when they're left neglected. But they can be intentionally designed and they can be intentionally cultivated. So let's not neglect them. Like all of you fabulous people here in this room, not neglecting your negotiating skills. So I'm a lawyer and a business architect. I feel like I'm in an AA meeting when I say that. Hello, I'm recovering from everything. But in law school, I specialized in negotiation and dispute resolution. And then I went on to be a litigator for the first half of my legal career, where negotiation was my job. And then I went into big enterprise transformation. Negotiation was really my job for that. So I feel like I have some good cred for talking about this particular topic today, and I'm excited to share. And I'm excited to listen to all your questions as we go along. If you've heard me speak before, I don't speak in a very structured way and tend to ramble. I'll try to save some time for questions at the end, but throughout, by all means, just speak up and we can chat away. The last thing that I want to say before I forget, I want to make a plug for Architecting for Good. Our world, as you all know, is going through a tremendous amount of change. And what really needs to be re-architected is a lot of civic infrastructure. A lot of local communities need better governance design. A lot of state and other institutions need a lot of help in architecting. So think about that as like your pro bono efforts. Think about how you can engage in your community to help in that way and reach out to Architecting for Good. We can support it. It could be a banner program if we get enough interest in these kinds of things. So I just want to put that out there because the world needs us right now. All right. So today, we're always negotiating. Everything that we do, not just at a deal table, not just when you're going in to talk about your salary, but all the time, how you advocate for your work, how you manage scope, how you surface trade-offs. All of these things are all a negotiation, yet we don't really think about it that way. So I thought it would be kind of neat to explore this from negotiation as like an enterprise capability. And so we're going to start there. We're going to talk about market. I feel like I should be kissing this thing, but I got this red lipstick on. Can everybody hear me online okay? Is that all right? Okay. And everybody in here can hear me, I assume? I don't ever need a microphone. So enterprise negotiation, we're going to talk about market access in pharma, big daddy of a negotiation program in an enterprise. I'm going to read to you a parable about bad market access negotiation. We're going to talk about negotiation as a capability system, and we're going to talk about how enterprise insights can fuel your own personal negotiating power. That I think is kind of fun because it does all hang together really well. And so I'm hoping that this can cross-pollinate insights for you when you go back and try to add value at your company and when you're also powering your own personal negotiation. Okay, so market access. In pharma, big pharma. For those of you who don't know, it's a crazy process. Market access the purpose of them is to get drugs to patients in a profitable way. This means that they have to essentially negotiate with the whole healthcare system. They have to deal with pricing boards. They have to deal with payers. They have to, negotiate with regulatory things. Like when you get a drug approval, that lets you on the field. Market access is the function at big pharmaceutical companies that tells you whether you can play and how much money you're going to make. Sales organization is different. So market access is a really big deal at these big pharma companies. But what it is it's a really complex thing. It's a whole bunch of interlocking capabilities, and it's a whole bunch of different teams that come together cross-functionally. And so it really takes a system to negotiate with the healthcare system, which is, I'm sure everyone has personal experience here with how crazy it is. Talk about something that needs re-architecting. But it's this hyper-conditional sort of area, and it is politically sensitive. It is consequence heavy. There's just all of these things to this. So even though you have this like kind of apex predator type negotiating idea of what market access can be, these functions like pretty reasonably underperform in a lot of different contexts. And I think that it isn't so much because they don't have the firepower or the skill or the talent, but I think it's because of the way that they think about negotiation. And so these are some myths that actually also are architectural opportunities. And this can apply to any sort of negotiation group. It doesn't necessarily have to be like Big Daddy Pharma. I just thought it was kind of like a neat way to talk about a really sophisticated system. But these are some myths about negotiation as a whole. Negotiation is an event. You go into the deal room and you sit down and you like throw down with your opponent, and that is what happens. That is not the way it happens. Negotiation happens over time. It can happen in several meetings. It can happen in every interaction that you have. Some of my most powerful settlement negotiations, the best move that I made was in making an appointment with the lawyer before, where I dropped like a little crumb of something that I wanted to get out there. And these are things that if you think about ahead of time, and if you think about it in a longer term sort of duration, you can be much more strategic in the way that you come to the table. Same thing with companies. Neil Sample today said, who owns the end-to-end process? Who owns negotiation as a capability at companies? I don't even know. Any one of your companies treat negotiation as a capability? See, they also don't treat governance as a capability. I feel like we really need to upend some of this stuff if we're going to meet this moment in time, but we can talk about that in another session too. So anyway, negotiation is an event. We consistently think, and I think this has to do a little bit with looking at this as an event, we think that people are good negotiators. Like, here I am, I'm studying in law school, I'm going to be a badass negotiator, and I'm going to go and litigate, and this is like, I'm going to like create great outcomes. There is some truth to that. There is some talent involved. But really, what it comes down to is preparation. It comes down to the kind of intelligence you gather. It comes down to how thoughtful you are about the process. There's so much more than just like being powerful in the room. And I think that makes negotiation for a lot of people, especially a personal negotiation that you're in, feel very intimidating. But if power comes from your preparation, I think you can take some of that intimidation factor out of this. So the other thing is, negotiation is about winning. Everybody thinks it's about, I love to win. I love to win more than the average bear. But negotiation is really about the process. It's about cultivating shared value with your opponent. It's about being curious and understanding what their needs are so that you can find out where your leverage points are. When you say that it's winning, it puts you in this like adversarial type of mindset that makes you think that this is some like sort of epic battle that you have to do. And that's not usually the case. It's not usually the case. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. Okay, so I'm going to read to you a parable, if I can make this work, all this technology. Okay, this is the parable of spreadsheet, dreadsheet. So this is going back to the pharma negotiation, just to give a little context, and then we're going to talk about some of the details afterwards. Once upon a Q4, in a gleaming glass tower filled with PhDs and MBAs, a market access team sat on the edge of a problem. This was a prosperous company at the height of its powers, an elite institution with towering ambition, brilliant people, and billion-dollar customers. The kind of company that prided itself on precision, on knowing things, and on playing the long game. The team was seasoned. Most had been in market access at that company their whole careers. Smart, mission-driven, genius financy types. They were fierce and prideful. In theory, they had everything. Their global footprint, strong HEOR models, the support of legal, and a pipeline forecasted to change lives. But their system lived in spreadsheets. Not one, not five, dozens. One version from market access, one from pricing, others from finance, one from a particular region with updated assumptions that no one updated elsewhere. Contract terms stored in PDFs on people's laptops, unsearchable and forgotten. A key risk model in a folder owned by someone who had since left the company. No data governance, no memory. You might think that this was like back in the 80s. No. This is a semi-real example that shall remain nameless. At any rate, every year, every negotiation, they started again, half guessing at what had been agreed, what had been modeled, what had been promised. Couldn't find decks that somebody else had on their laptop. The team used, this is the problem with reading it off my phone. The team had institutional knowledge, but the institution didn't. Then came a critical inflection point, a complex tender negotiation in a strategically vital market. The team used last year's numbers, confident, aligned, fast, except one decimal point was off. Just a rounding error, someone suggested. But downstream, that number informed a region-wide pricing corridor, which was, in pharma, they if you set a price, it has knock-on consequences to what happens down the road. So it ends up, the pricing corridors end up being a pretty significant deal. So the number informed a region-wide pricing corridor, which was picked up in a global forecast, which was shared with investors, which shaped a competitor strategy, which rippled back into payer negotiations 2 quarters later. And by the time anyone noticed, it was already baked into their company strategy. The rounding error, a margin calculation off by 0.2%, manually copied from the final use this spreadsheet that was verified by 2 finance departments, 3 different market access team members. Just 0.2%. Not enough to raise any eyebrows until you realize that 0.2% was $80 million. Not counting knock-on consequences for the ripple effects that we mentioned. This was not a story the market access team wanted told. So someone was blamed and fired, just not cut out for the fast-paced, chaotic environment of a market access organization. And the team went about its business. Isn't that horrifying as an architect? So the moral of our story, spreadsheets are not systems, version control is not memory, and heroics are not architecture. Negotiation, especially in market access, is too consequential to be built on invisible infrastructure. You may survive on charisma and stabby negotiation in the room. You may get lucky on instinct. But if your intelligence and your assumptions are fragmented, your power will leak. And the cost of that leak is not necessarily paid today, but quarter over quarter, in trust, in margin, in missed learning opportunities, and worst of all, no one sees it until the future arrives already miscalculated. Womp, womp, womp. So my presentation tomorrow gets even dorkier. Sorry, Michael, you know it. So here's the deal. All of this, as you can tell how I framed it up, I think it's a huge architectural opportunity. Negotiation in a company, even if it's in a team, even if it's just personally, I think that there's a lot to be said for rethinking the way that this works in most companies. Because if you can have these big daddy apex predators have all of this problem and dysfunction and, not wanting to expose these problems, you can have that anywhere. And when you're talking about this is the money that's coming into your company. When you're negotiating with your key customers, it is absolutely critical. Yet we still treat it so siloed in so many different places. So to understand in your particular context of your particular company, how you see your architectural value with clarity, you of course need to understand the context because you have all these interlocking capabilities, even much more simple than market access. You have interlocking capabilities, data governance being one of them, certainly, managing deal flow, customer information, all of these things all come together. So you need to build some context. You need to understand what is the problem that you're solving really, because you listen to my example, it's not just about spreadsheets. There were some talent dynamics there. People who had been in that function for their careers for, 5, 10, 15 years, they just kind of lived with these problems. They didn't even know it was a problem. They just thought that this is so fast paced and this is so important. And this is, just managed chaos. Oh, does anybody say managed chaos? Can't manage chaos. Everybody knows that, right? So at any rate, what problem are we solving really? Are there hidden structural issues that are a problem? This particular team didn't have lower level analysts on their team. Because it was such an important function, they wanted them all to be, at a associate director level and higher. Well, is that really the right thing? Is that really the right thing when you need so much information to have a healthy negotiation? These are all design choices, but they're informed so much by the people dynamics, by the organizational perception of what this team should be, and without ever really looking at like, oh, the negotiation itself is a complex system. It is something that we need to think about end to end. And as Neil pointed out earlier, who owns the end-to-end process? So let's see. So sense making. I use sense making very deliberately. I don't want to say diagnostic because that means that you think that you can arrive at a conclusion. But the reality is when you have a lot of these interlocking capabilities and the complexity here, and Michael and I will be talking about complexity a lot more tomorrow in our presentation, you really need to try to understand the problem space, but be open to it changing further as you learn more. So talking to people, reading between the lines, having the empathy that our wonderful previous presenter discussed, and trying to understand like what really is at issue here. And then trying to sense make around your intervention. So many people would be like, oh, spreadsheet. You know what you need? You just need a, good, you just throw a little rub a little Salesforce on it and you're G to G. That's not the only problem. Not the only problem. So you really want to understand, like, how does the team work? How does the information flow? Value streams and capabilities, how does the value flow through the negotiation end to end? Not just the particular team, not just the particular function, but how does the value flow through finance, through pricing, through market access, or whatever teams you have? And what are those capabilities that enable those things? Can you pay attention to the seams between functions so that you can have better handoffs, so that you have information that you can act upon? We'll be talking about that tomorrow too, because information only counts if it can be acted upon. Decision rights, who has them? What information are they basing this on? That is incredibly important. Without that, what context do you have? How can you understand, the trade-off? Another thing that, Neil's sample was amazing this morning. Another thing that he said is trade-offs happen anyway. The only question is whether somebody's steering them. If you don't know who the decision rights owners are in the most critical negotiations in your company, then what are we doing? If you're not getting them the right information because your data is a hot mess and fragmented everywhere, how are they making those decisions? How are they making good ones? By gut feel? I think gut feel is one of the most important things that there is, but you also got to have the information. You got to have the evidence generated so that you can back up your position. You've got to have that information so that you understand multiple perspectives in the business. And then my own personal favorite, feedback loops. Does everybody love feedback loops in here? Just got tons of nods. Feedback loops, I think, are the most important thing going, because when you have complex systems, you cannot control them. Control is an illusion. Power is not control. Power is clarity. Power is understanding the dynamics that you have in this particular situation. And the feedback loops provide that. Ongoing feedback loops where things come, after you've completed a deal. What did you learn from it? What information should be stored for the next deal coming through? Those kinds of things are really cool architectural opportunities that are messed up in almost every company I've ever seen. So these are some of the leverage points, I think, for architectural value in terms of negotiation, or architectural value anywhere, really. Okay. So I'm not going to belabor this. I can't stop myself from putting dorky cartoons in ChatGPT. Sometimes I've tried to lessen it because I'm so horrified by the environmental impacts, but I figured one was going to be okay, so I just put it all in one. So these are some, pretty predictable failures in negotiation processes at companies. Shadow strategy. You have your internal organization who's running the numbers and doing everything. Are you laughing, Joe? And then your sales team is out there. They just want the deal closed. They want to be able to try to get the most money possible for their customer, because they're going to be happy for the rest of the year, and that'll give them tons of money. They just want the deal closed, so they want it to be more. So you end up kind of negotiating with yourself versus negotiating with your customer. So that happens all over the place. The dead loops, feedback loops, information that you take in, if it doesn't go anywhere, if you can't act upon it, if it isn't informing some of your strategy, if it isn't informing some of your actions that you're taking in this process, what the heck good is that information? So those feedback loops cannot be dead. They need to be closed. But that happens, oh my gosh, in everything, much more than negotiation. Blind empathy. I struggle with this one. I really like people to like me. And we really can't underestimate the power of people wanting to be liked. I know it sounds ridiculous, especially in an enterprise context, but it's people doing the negotiating, and people care about this. And if you haven't looked at your trade-offs and surfaced the tensions in the negotiation and understand the information that you're working with, it is very easy to fall into the trap of doing something that feels like a light conciliatory thing. And because you want to be liked and you kind of feel like it could be a good move, but it might actually be disastrous. It might have long-term consequences if you don't understand what those are. You can also play that to your advantage in so many places. Tower of Babel. Everybody's saying yes internally, but nobody's really talking about the same thing. A lot of times negotiation in companies, like you're talking about all the sorts of cross-functional stuff. Neil again talked about this earlier. Like, oh yeah, we're good with this. And they're not speaking the same language. They're saying, oh yeah, this is good for us from a risk exposure perspective. This is good from a margin impact perspective. All of these things. And just because each group likes them, thinks that it's a good decision, doesn't mean that it's collectively a good decision. Does it line up to your strategy? Does it line up to your objectives with this customer? Does it line up to, I don't know, the deal that you might have to do next year with them? So these kinds of things are really important, and they're all architectural, except for like the third hand on that woman on the lower right. That's super weird. Okay, so if we started treating negotiation like a complex system, you might create like a little operating model. And so that's kind of what this is. And this is like, Bill Ulrich would like roll his eyes. Yeah, all the purists are gonna hate the way I roll with this, but I tend to create operating models to just try to ground myself in some context. So like, what are the phases so that you can kind of look through it, like what happens in the negotiation, that is, a little bit of a model that you want to use to inform these things. And then start thinking through like, well, what does it take to have intelligent negotiation? Strategic foresight. You want to get ahead of this. You want to understand, what does the deal look like? What does the deal look like from start to finish? Who are you talking to? Who are the people in the room? Are there regulatory changes afoot? Are there, there's so much information that can help you if you get ahead of the game and think about the negotiation longer term. Cross-functional governance, getting everybody aligned and getting that narrative sorted with people. With all of the differing interests that are out there, that one is really tough. Evidence generation, getting your data together. Anyway, I don't need to read these, but this is part, we're going to talk about them more in a personal context as well. But the whole point is that like, you really want to think about it as a system. And so I use models to ground myself in the system itself. And then I turn to capabilities-based planning. That's how I do it, because I think that is what helps me give the context to other people. It keeps me out of the language of being like, well, do you think this is an L1 or an L2? And all of that. It has a little bit more cross-functional relevance for a lot of people. So negotiation as an enterprise system might have these kinds of capabilities. I try to bucket them just to think about them fully, and then that way you can transition to capabilities-based planning. It works best when it's designed and connected. So this way you have developed a system level perspective that you can then prioritize, help decide which capabilities you want to uplift, help, solve the problems that are the most apparent. Like, for instance, customer information. If you don't have a CRM for negotiation in a complex system and you don't have consistent customer information, that is just a recipe for disaster. People are turning over at more and more rapid rates. You're losing a ton of institutional intelligence, and negotiations are very often year over year over year. And you want to be able to have the information from your last closed deal with that particular customer to be able to inform your strategy going into the next one. So easy answers. So, sorry, I think I didn't sleep very well last night and I'm a little over caffeinated. But when you do this, when you look at these capabilities and you start to look at this as a system and you can show where this impact is, this helps develop trust internally. Can you imagine the leaders of the market acts of at this pharma company where they have this huge disaster afterwards? They're like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? Well, if you can show them negotiation as a system, if you can say like, yeah, what happened last time, we're like really up in our game on deal lifecycle management and we're going to start killing it. And this is how we're going to go about it. And that $80 million situation won't happen anymore. We're good to go. So that internal trust is really important. That's why the market access team didn't want to talk about the story. They wanted to preserve their jobs. They didn't want to be looked at as bad leaders. Those are their interests. That has nothing to do with their role, their position at the company, their title, none of that. That has to do with their own personal interests going into this and going into the remediation. Somebody got fired. That's serious stuff. Like when people get fired, there could be architectural, structural reasons for that. I don't think we think about that enough. And I think that's really sad. Risks need to come to the architects first, I feel like. So anyway, so this builds, if you look at your capabilities as a system, if you look at negotiation as a system like this, and you start to build this trust is absolutely critical internally. It is also absolutely critical externally. I know a different company who had really, power asymmetry in negotiations where one organization is really powerful and has a bunch of the leverage and the other is kind of like at their mercy. So for many, many years, one company had most of the leverage and their superb negotiating skills, absent empathy, were really rough. They were really, really jerky. The team today is really struggling with that because the power dynamics have shifted. Regulatory and market changes have shifted. So they no longer have that same power. And even though the jerky negotiators are gone, they're still up against a problem that was started because of lack of trust in the last people. Like that has long-term consequences for the way you negotiate. It has long-term professional consequences if you start to negotiate this way. So trust is a system level lever that we should think about, that we should architect for in negotiation and everywhere, of course. All right, so if negotiation is a system and trust, which is human created, it's a human endeavor to make people trust, right? How does our own personal situation come into this? How do we think about these concepts and this sort of construct as like uplifting your own personal negotiating power? Because it's actually pretty similar capabilities, just at a smaller scale. So this that we just saw can be applied to your own in-person insights. Actually, I should stop before we go down the personal road. Does anybody want to talk a little bit more about the enterprise before we move on? Was it confusing? Got it? We're good? Okay. All right. If it was confusing, talk to me afterwards. I'm always happy to break down anything in excruciating detail. Okay. So this one we're going to spend a little bit of time on, because I think that there's a lot of concepts here that I want to talk about. So strategic foresight, I think that is an exceptionally important part of this mix. Design forward. So even for personal negotiations, think about it. Think about how you want to roll into the negotiation. Think about, is it just one meeting? Is it really just one meeting? Do you have opportunities to provide information where you can sort of set the stage? There's a really popular negotiating tactic called anchoring. And anchoring is when you kind of start to you set the stage for what you want to get in the negotiation. There's all sorts of cool bias data that's like, even if you give somebody like an absolutely absurd number, It's still, you have more favorable outcomes than if you start at something reasonable. Interesting, right? Because you're negotiating with humans. Interesting thing. All right, so the cross-functional governance piece in companies is an interesting thing from a personal perspective, because usually you're not just negotiating with one person. Usually you're negotiating with many people. Think about like a salary negotiation. You're not just negotiating with your boss. That is not it. You're also negotiating with your HR department on the policies that they have in place. So like, what other interests are here in this? Map the system of the decision that you're trying to advocate for. Map the players, the stakeholders, these kinds of things. These are all things that will put you in a better position for your negotiation. Evidence generation. This is a really interesting thing. Lead with meaning from your negotiating partner's perspective. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. But when you collect data and you collect what kind of evidence you need, you're not just trying to make your best case. You're trying to make the case that is going to get you closer to your outcomes from the perspective of the other person. You're trying to bring them along. You are trying to make them move your way. So when you think about evidence generation, don't just think about it from like knowing your numbers in your business, knowing the margin that you have to hit, knowing what your bonus is going to be based on whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. Make sure you're looking at it from multiple perspectives, regardless of what it is. This has to do with like transformation efforts too. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But like when you're trying to convince people that they want to change, what sorts of evidence do they need to want to change? What sorts of information is going to help them understand the WIFM of what they're looking at? Like, so this evidence generation idea, framed differently than how we usually think about it, about just collecting the data, is I think really, really important. Framing your options. Here's another. So Neil today said, frame options, surface consequences, link choices explicitly to business priorities, and ensure that you're making intentional choices. Framing is a superpower in negotiation, no matter how big, no matter how small. The way that you frame the problems, the way that you frame the trade-offs, the way that you frame your asks to your negotiating partners is really, really a powerful thing. So think about it. Think about it from their perspective. Think about what assumptions are underlying your framing and the way that you're approaching the negotiation. What blind spots might you have going into this negotiation that you should be aware of, or that you might be able to pressure test, or that you might be able to pick up some additional evidence to support. That framing is interesting. And like, develop a portfolio of what your asks are and what the trade-offs are. Because maybe there's another negotiating thing that you'll see a lot, BATNA. It stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. And it's really meant to get some clarity around what you're willing to do and what your trade-offs are and these kinds of things. And so if you frame your BATNA well, it helps you have negotiating clarity. It helps you have that sort of power. Yeah, that is really all I want. Does anybody have any questions about this? And I'm going sense making. That's the feedback loops thing. I'll never say anything without saying feedback loops. It's my like precious everything right now. Cybernetics is my jam. All right, so taking this one step further, you may have noticed these little orange things that have been at the bottom of my slides that apply in the enterprise context. They also apply in the personal context. So it takes a system to negotiate one, understanding the structures that you're dealing with, understanding constraints and flows. Taking the salary negotiation is a really good one. I was transitioning into a new role, and I knew with certainty that I deserved a huge raise. and so I asked for one, and my boss was like, I'd really prefer to just go with the HR recommendation this time and give you a big boost at regular annual cycle time, because I just to make it easier and get it done. no, woman, that is not the way that goes at this company. I know that you are during annual reviews that you're locked into a certain percentage increase. I know here that even though HR is delivering me their, 4% thing that they is like their standard offer, I know that without even getting any more approval than your HR manager, that you can get up to 10% for me. So don't act like this is some big burden. Of course, I didn't deliver it that way, but it definitely helped inform my negotiation. Pleased to say that I did get what I was asking for. But it took that knowledge. It took understanding the structure. It took understanding the system and the different considerations at play. And had I just thought that I needed to convince my boss, I would have been in a very underleveraged position going into that negotiation without understanding those things. Those HR policies are available to you. You hopefully can find them. I know it's really tough at some companies, but you can find them. And you can also ask. You can collect information. I ended up getting a whole bunch of like salary band information at one point so that I knew where I was, knew where I was in the salary band just by asking. Like that stuff, that is all important. So never underestimate that. Control is an illusion. Design your leverage. You can shape the conditions. Take the salary example again. You know you want to ask for a raise at your, annual review time. You have a one-on-one, maybe a week before with your boss. How do you want to use that one-on-one prior to your annual review with your negotiation to help demonstrate your value in a way that could lead to a greater increase, that could give you some leverage in that negotiation? Why not think about it that way? Why not try to shape the conditions and shape how she's thinking about things and remind her how awesome you are before you move into the thing that we would usually call the event of the negotiation, right? So you can shape conditions. And you can shape them in a lot of different ways, all contextual. So you got to do a little sense making, a little trying to understand who you're working with. Talk a little bit more about that as well. Power is not control, it's clarity. Power comes from knowing what matters and why. The boss who I was negotiating with, she was a new people leader. She didn't want to rock the boat. She didn't want, she was, kind of like trying to feel her way through this whole thing. That really mattered. And I knew that mattered to her. And so when I responded to her with, like, oh, did you know about this like system in HR? Do you know that like all you need is Sarah's approval to get temper? Like it's really like you don't even have to ask your boss for that. Like this is like something that we can just like do together. It made it much easier for her to say yes to me. So knowing what matters to the person you're negotiating with and why is really, really powerful negotiating stuff. Systems, grounding, and capability-based planning. You can do this too. Think about how you might have your own personal negotiating system. You can play to your strengths. You can kind of put together like, oh, I'm going to do my information gathering here. I'm going to, think through the trade-offs. I'm going to, put all these things together. That can be really powerful. And that way you can play to your strengths. The other piece of this, maybe I should have flipped those, play to your strengths and understand your emotions. Emotions and negotiating. It's like the worst, especially for women. Sorry, it's just true. We have a really, really hard time sometimes, especially negotiating for ourselves. And everybody really has it. And understanding your emotions in a negotiating context could not be more important. When we get fired up, when we start to feel that little flutter, we make worse decisions. We see things less clearly. All of these things. So understanding that about yourself is really important. I do things like, because I'm super emotional, so I always have like the little flutters, and I'm insecure, so I kind of have this wound up feeling when I worry that I'm asking for too much in these things. And some presenter at some point told me to push my big toe into the floor. Apparently there's some sort of like reflexive thing that like keeps you from crying or from freaking out and stuff. So, so I know that about myself. But the way that I think about this now is not just like, oh my God, I'm an emotional basket case. It's like, oh, I'm getting emotional here. This is a signal. Am I getting emotional because of what my negotiating partner said? That's a signal that there's something. How can I look at this signal from his perspective? that jerk is trying to like minimize my experience, that he's trying to manipulate me. He's trying, she's, trying to undercut me on a certain aspect of the agreement. So those emotions that you feel, don't be hard on yourself about them. Know that they're there and use them as signals for like what to ask the question, to be curious. What is going on here? What is making me feel this way? Is this a power move by the other person? Is this an opportunity for me to make my own power move? What does this look like? So they really can be tools. And empathy, definitely a good tool. There's no substitute for building trust. There just isn't. We are in this weird AI world where we are like so digital. Everybody's talking about how agents are just going to like negotiate everything for us. I just don't buy it. We're negotiating with humans. Keep it human. We've got to build trust. We've got to build credibility. It's the right thing to do, and it also has better outcomes. Much better outcomes, surprisingly. I meant to get some stats on this from a book, but I forgot the book at home because I was bringing too many other books for my presentation with Michael. Okay. So it's a little bit of, does anyone want to talk a little bit more about any of those things before? Yeah. What you got? Time is a huge element, and that is what I mean by negotiation is not an event. It is distributed. It's distributed across teams and stakeholders and people and time. Time is a huge important thing. Thank you for reinforcing that. I couldn't agree more. Oh, time. Anything else? Any other reactions? Feelings? Anybody pushing their big toe into the ground right now? No, I'm serious. It works. It works because I like, especially during like salary negotiations or annual reviews. Like for whatever I can like throw down with the best of them when I'm arguing on behalf of a company, but when it's about myself, I'm a zoo. So I use that all the time, and it really does help. Yes, sir.
You have enterprise negotiation, and that's like when that's part of the enterprise value stream. Like they actually need that as a capability. And then you have personal negotiation, but somewhere in the middle, there's like internal enterprise negotiation, like where your team has to negotiate with the enterprise, and it's maybe not just personal negotiation. It's like your budget or something like that.
Yeah.
How does that fit in? I mean, it's not quite like you need a full CRM system to handle internal, but there's still multiple people involved.
Yeah.
And a process and all that kind of stuff. So how do we think about that?
Yeah, no, that's is a great call out, because the same things that you look at it from like a super complex enterprise negotiation down to a team system, it's the same thing. You want to understand your stakeholders. You might want to map them. You might, and actually we'll kind of talk about this as we're talking about negotiation dynamics. You want to understand like which team member of yours is responsible for the information that you are taking to your budget meetings, understanding what priorities are. So really like sense making the problem. I forget where this is. Oh yeah, there we go. Oh no, that's not it. Sense making the problem. I just do too much. Sense making the problem space, like what you want, what you're trying to achieve, understanding like where you're getting the information from, the value streams that you're like trying to provide for your team and how they intersect with the budget requests that you're making. What information do you need? What capabilities do you need on your team to be able to like consistently ask for a good budget request? It all kind of hangs together. It's all like fractal. So if you think about like enterprise system as the big daddy, personal one, and the same systems can apply just at different scales. So like a little bit of you can just abstract a little bit. Does that help? Maybe. I tend to love to abstract everything, as you can tell.
I love this question about how do you negotiate as mom. This is brilliant. Where you're like emotionally attached to the outcome, but it's on other people's behalf. That's how I heard that. I have a comment. This is the best talk I've heard in 10 years. I've seen luminaries in science, history, technology, business. Would you consider doing like a several hours workshop?
Of course I would.
Yes.
Are you kidding me? Give me a microphone and a little snack and I'm good to go. Thank you. That's so nice, Mara. I appreciate
the only thing
that.
I have to say. There you go.
Thanks. Oh, I'm pushing my big toe to the ground. Thank you, though. Truly, that means a lot because I care about this so much, especially because negotiation is like a architect's whole job. It's so important. And here we are, we're facing the biggest changes that business has faced. Some say since the internet, but I say even more so. Like we're changing the way that we consume information. We're changing the way that we interact with each other. The way that we roll, the way that we truth tell, the way that we influence has never been more important. So negotiation, I think, is just such a critical thing right now. And thinking about it that way, not as if you're like trying to come over the top or like even really convince people about what they want. It's like trying to find that shared value, trying to understand what the other person's needs are through curiosity and empathy. Those kinds of things are really going to drive better architectural outcomes because at bottom, we are the people who can see the whole. Society needs business to be something different than it is right now. So many people are miserable at their jobs. Companies are it's just bonkers out there. So like, can we use some skills around reframing to bring people along, to build organizations that we can be proud of, to help influence executives to understand the wisdom of what our proposals are? I think it's really important. And that's maybe one area that I would disagree with Neil on. He said, truth telling is our thing. And I do think that truth telling is our thing. And I think being objective is really, really important. But I also think that negotiating is very, very important and framing things and influencing things in a positive direction for the people with whom you work every day to make their lives better, to put less friction in the process, and to save money and to improve outcomes and all of the things that can go along with change. So I see you have a microphone.
I do, and I have a question. So I was really excited for this because there's some change happening within my team. We're at an inflection point where there's some really positive things that can happen. So you're talking about negotiating being an event is something that I've been trying to stage because I see the opportunity coming. But then this gentleman here who pointed out time makes me think about timing. So like in terms of individually and as a team, there's multiple opportunities I see to negotiate a change for improvement. Like we've got the value prop out there. I've been making the case without even having the decision makers there yet. But I'm just wondering, like in your experience of being a tried and true negotiator, are there any like inflection points that are like something we should keep on the radar? Like, oh, here's an opportunity where we shouldn't miss it. Like just some key things in the general life cycle of negotiation. Like this is a tipping point you should take advantage of.
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that the best that I can give you in this, I mean, okay, like I said this to somebody last night. I'm a lawyer and a business architect. It depends is like my favorite answer on the planet. So I think it depends. I think that if you can sense make as best as you can, like what sorts of change can your team digest? What, currently, what sorts of things are happening at the company that might be able to be like maybe not a tipping point, but maybe a leverage point that you can do. Like, oh, the CEO is going to give some big talk on resetting, blah blah blah, new growth strategy, whatever it is. Is there something that you can use to advance your objective a little bit? Have you ever heard of Kairos moments? Like serendipitous moments, like moments of import, those kinds of things. If you're careful as you're going through this process and you watch out for those things, I guarantee you'll be able to find them. So if you are clear on what, kind of the next steps directionally you're trying to go, I think that you'll be able to sense them when you get there. And I think that that's really hard because I want to be able to plan everything in advance if I can. But you have to be able to bob and weave and be adaptable. And maybe something happens where you're like, oh, this is going to convince them on that particular issue. I don't know how helpful that was, though. That it's good. Therapy. Yeah. Oh, 5 minutes. Oh, 5 minutes. I want to talk about this all day. Okay. I'll buzz through. Okay. So, clarifying value propositions. You have your value proposition out there. Business wants to move fast. You want to move smartly and intelligently. That you are negotiating a value narrative there. That is a negotiation. How you frame your value, how you frame the value that you're providing to the other people, how you're talking about these things, how you're positioning them, what data you bring to the table. All of those things matter when you're talking about discussing a value narrative. I think that this is a good opportunity for business architects right now. I think we've been kind of like clamoring to get to the table in a lot of different ways. I think that the immense amount of change that's on the horizon puts us at the table. If it doesn't put us at the table, we need to negotiate a better spot because it is sorely needed. But so that is a really important thing. Balancing competing priorities. This is where articulating trade-offs and framing them for your bosses is like, or your bosses or your stakeholders is an incredibly important thing. Again, framing. Enabling cross-functional alignment. You have product and compliance and sales and finance all in a room, and you're trying to like get alignment on these things. This is one place where I think AI is super helpful. I have these roles in the room. You can even put personalities in there. What are some trade-offs that I might not be thinking of? What are some potential synergies that I might be able to surface to build some trust amongst this group and some buy-in into whatever model I'm trying to put forward to help build alignment? I think that we tend to think about all priorities as competing. We tend to think that alignment means that everybody needs to understand the why in the same way. That is not true. Really, what we need to do is to have people understand enough of like the shared output, the shared direction of where you're going, the common ground amongst those functions to be able to make good decisions. Their WIFM might be all different, and the same step could be important to all of them. So if you can highlight that, enabling that kind of cross-functional alignment in that way is a powerful thing. Governing change without control. We have so much responsibility for change in our professions, but we do not own the teams or the tools or all of those things. And so that can be really hard. That is your leverage there is relational. Your leverage there is empathy, putting yourself in your stakeholder shoes, trying to understand what's motivating them, not motivating them from their position, but motivating from their interests. I had a senior leader in a compliance program. We desperately needed some transformation. She was about to retire. She did not want to deal with it. Just did not want to deal with the big change. And that like blew my mind. It doesn't fit with my philosophy. We always leave things better than we find it. And like this was sorely needed for business outcomes, sorely needed for people happiness, so many things. She didn't want to deal. So my negotiation with her was not about like the value of the transformation. My negotiation with her was solely focused on how she would not have to lift a finger for the transformation that I was proposing. This will be served up to you on a platter. You're going to look like a hero and you don't have to do anything. Happy retirement and get out of here because we need better investment in our compliance program. So orchestrating buy-in and timing. Architecture delivered too early is a recipe for resistance. Recipe for resistance. You need to understand where people are. One of my favorite tricks for a really long time was having a PowerPoint that I would put like a little slice of the model that I thought would appeal to the stakeholder with whom I was dealing, talk with them on the phone. I sort of directionally knew where I would want to go, but I would gather information from them. What's important to you? What do you think about this? How is this landing on you? And we would sit there and we would build next parts of the model. It was in another deck. I had already done it, but she was doing it with me. It created ownership. It wasn't like, I was open to any changes that she would have proposed, but it helped her understand. It helped bring her along. Because if you just take and put like a big, beautiful model out in front, like people get overwhelmed, especially if they're not architects. So, so that was kind of a good trick that I learned. If you read the power dynamics, the sequencing, the influences, you might want to breadcrumb. People are familiar with breadcrumbing, where you like bring people along. It's kind of like the PowerPoint. I said, like, give them little bits of information at different times, especially people who you know to be resistant to change. It's all stakeholder management. It's all about knowing your negotiating partners and what they want. Neil also said today, I swear I'm going to be quoting his presentation for the rest of forever, but he said, what we do is we invite understanding of others. Oh, I love that. That's negotiation in a nutshell from an architectural perspective. Just love it. Just love it. Okay. So since I don't have any time, I'm just going to say a couple things. I left you guys this. You don't read it. It's I'll tell you what it is. I left you a few frameworks that you can take away. So empathy mapping. This is something I copy this and I put it into AI and I say, I'm negotiating with this person. Please give me an empathy map on these people. Before I even started putting together a presentation for you all, I say, hey, ChatGPT, I'm giving a presentation to a whole bunch of senior badass business architects. Like, can you do an empathy map for them? What are they hearing? And it just provided a lot of like thinking about how I wanted to frame a presentation for you all. And it can be, this is like a presentation, this is a negotiation, whatever it is. It's like a good hack to get your, and it's really fast because of thank you AI. It used to take me forever to do these things. I mean, I would do these for every single client that I had, every single mediation I went to, every single everything. So good. This is a great one. So you start with, what do we want people to do? I wanted you to think about negotiation differently. That is ultimately what my goal was here today, to think about it as a system, to think about where you can leverage architectural value. So what do you want them to do? What then do you all need to believe in order to do that? You need to know, we're going to get to that in a second because I'm going to do this fast. And then what do you need to know? What is the data? What is the information? What is a metaphor that might land with somebody? Like, what do you need to know to form that belief to help you do this next action? Really good little hack for persuasion and presentations and everything. So love that one a lot too. So these are some of the beliefs that you believe that negotiation is a system. You believe that it's distributed across teams, roles, time. So much happens informally. Hallway chats are super awesome for negotiation. Architecture shapes outcome. All this is there for you in your deck. There's also a couple other little things. I did like a little platform situation or a little canvas situation for you that'll be in the deck. But here's the deal. Negotiation is all about vantage. And the wider your view, the more perspectives you bring in to your view, the more clarity you can have. And we know power is not about control. It is about clarity. Clarity doesn't come from authority. Clarity doesn't come from charisma. It comes from architecture. That's all I have for you. So hit me up. I love talking about this stuff. I love talking about everything. But hit me up anytime. I'm here for this community. I really believe in us to be able to be champions of positive change in our world. And anyone who wants to go on that mission, let's do it.